Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Google this evening. We've done this speaker series for a few years now virtually, and we've always used Zoom before. So this is our first time doing Google Meet. So hopefully we can pull this off. I'm feeling very confident that we'll be able to do this for you tonight. If you weren't on when Beth said, there is a place where you can post questions, and I'll be moderating that tonight as we have some of the ladies that are going to be speaking about kindergarten and what to expect next year. So welcome to the Lindbergh family. We're excited to have you guys. If you have older siblings, and this is the second one, welcome back. Very excited to have you guys and welcome you to our schools. And while it's an exciting time, kindergarten can cause some anxiety for our students and parents alike. So just want to let you know that we're all here to support you. And it's going to be an amazing time, amazing year, all kinds of first day pictures at the school and all that fun stuff. So lots of great stuff to be looking forward to next year. But let's start by introducing the team here. So we have assembled the Kindergarten Avengers for you tonight, myself excluded. I'm Craig Hamby. I'm the Director of Elementary Education at Lindbergh Schools, and I have with us tonight Dr. Sarah Valter. She is our District Literacy Coordinator. We have Mrs. Claire Eads, who is a kindergarten teacher at Dressel. We have Mrs. Jen Eilers, who is a special education teacher and sees kindergarten students at Sappington Elementary. We have Mrs. Alyssa Hufker, who is a kindergarten teacher at Kinnerly Elementary. And we have Mrs. Stephanie Meesey from Long Elementary, a kindergarten teacher. And tonight is Mrs. Meesey's first time doing this. So we'll be judging her tonight. Everyone else is a veteran, but Stephanie's new to this. So I'll be taking notes on how well she does this evening in this presentation. So when it comes time to register, one of the first things we got to do is talk about getting registration started. So kindergarten registration will actually start on February 3rd, and the registration window will be open until March 14th. It will close for a short time there to get everything updated, and it will open up again later in the spring. But this is our first push, and as a district, we'd love to have as many people get registered in this time as we can, because this helps us determine our staffing for the next school years. Because once we know how many students we're going to have coming to the individual schools, it gives us an idea of how many kindergarten teachers we're going to need. Sometimes we hire some extra teachers, and sometimes the teachers move around a little bit. So the sooner you get registered, the better. So my advice is, please, as soon as February 3rd gets here, let's get those registrations started. If you go to the website, there's a families tab on the Lindbergh website, and you can click on registration, then you click on kindergarten, and that will take you to where you can click on new families. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. So this might be where we have to pause the recording and come back a couple times. Everyone's going to register as a new family. So even if you have, well, I've got a third grader that already goes to school, I get it. But everyone in our system, when you're registering kindergarten, you're going to click new family, and that's how you're going to register your kindergartner. Except for, here's the one caveat: if you are already if your child is a student in our Lindbergh Early Childhood building, those students will be automatically rolled up. So you won't have to fill out everything there. You'll just have to fill out the annual verification that all of us parents do every year in the summer that we do. So all this information is on the Lindbergh website. You can see there our registrar is Mrs. Terry Musante. And you can send that email to registrar@lindberghschools.ws if you have any questions whatsoever. And there's a phone number up there for you as well. The slides, Beth Johnson, who's run the slides tonight, these will be posted. So this video will be posted on YouTube. I don't know if it's later tonight or tomorrow. And the slide deck will also be posted on the website, where you can click on it and go back and look through any of these slides. And as soon as February 3rd hits, we will have a banner. You can go on to the next slide, Beth. It's fine. We'll have a banner. So instead of having to click the families tab and go to registration, it'll be right there on the front page. And I put this QR code up here. So if you wanted to save it in your phone right now, you could take a picture of that QR code and just leave that open in your browser until February 3rd if you'd like. And we'll put this QR code up again at the end of the video as well. So we are going to start to move into the Avengers are going to start talking about kindergarten here, and I will be moderating the questions, and I'll be checking the Q&A to see if there's any questions. I might stop from time to time and pose a question to our panel of educators, and we'll get all those answered for you this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Eilers, who's going to talk a little bit about some of our students who might be participating in special education as a kindergartner.
All right, thanks, Craig. So I have some very basic information to go over at this point. But basically, if your child has a current IEP and let me start over. If they have a current IEP, when you register, no matter where they're attending school, there will be a place on the registration form for you to indicate that your child does have an IEP and that they are currently receiving special education services. And that includes services of any kind. So your child may be getting just some services in the areas of speech and language or academics. It spans the whole gamut. So whatever they would be receiving those services for, you can indicate that on the registration form when you go through that registration process. Now, I will also let you know that if your child is currently attending Lindbergh ECE, then we as the special education team in the elementary schools will be in contact with those ECE teachers, and we will be getting that information from those teachers. So we will be in direct contact. We will be at your child's transition IEP meetings. And by we, I mean someone from your child's school will be a representative there from the special education staff. So if your child is not currently attending Lindbergh ECE, but is coming to a Lindbergh Elementary with an IEP, we ask that you go ahead and contact your elementary school's counselor to let them know that your child is coming in with that IEP, and they may be able to answer some questions, and even possibly we might be able to attend those IEP meetings in the spring. I think that about covers it.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to throw in one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about the website is that there is a link on there. If you're not sure, I don't know what elementary my child is going to go to. There is a map that you can click on and you type in your address and it will tell you exactly which elementary that you will be attending. And an IEP, sometimes us educators, we talk in these acronyms. And and I'm not sure if Jen pointed this out, but that's an individualized education plan. And a lot of our kindergartners might come in with some special services in speech or language, like Mrs. Eiler said. And sometimes we have what's called a YCDD, where some of our kindergartners have it's called a young child with a developmental delay. Little extra attention to get them up to speed as they start the school age from their pre-K program. Thank you, Mrs. Eilers. And I think now as we get into pre-academics, which there's a teacher, Mrs. Floyd, at the early childhood would not be happy. She doesn't like me to call it pre-academics. It's academics at a pre-K level, but I've gotten a bad habit of calling it pre-academics. But this, to me, is some of the most important things that you can do with your child now to prepare them for kindergarten next year. And I believe Mrs. Meese is going to talk to us about these pre-academics.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Craig. You're right. It's really important whenever we have kindergarten screenings. A lot of parents will ask after the screening's over, like, what can I do to help my child prepare for kindergarten? And this is really the list that the kindergarten teachers share, making sure students can do things like putting on a coat, zipping up their own coat, wearing Velcro shoes if they're not able to tie yet, being able to clean up after themselves, following their routines and schedules with limited reminders, listening and following rules, one-step directions start out with, then two-step directions. And in kindergarten, we begin pretty quickly giving those multi-step directions. Opening up their own food items like a bento box, a lunch box, Ziploc bags, opening water bottles. Those are all really important so that they can get their things independently, especially during lunchtime. Lunch is about 20 minutes, and there are building assistants to help, but we want them to be able to efficiently open their things and eat in the time that they have. Being able to ask for help if they need it, using the writing tools appropriately. That is something that I know all of us in kindergarten work on at the very beginning of the year, those fine motor skills. But that would be really great to kind of work on during the summer, using scissors and glue, opening and closing their glue sticks, their glue caps, and then being responsible for their own supplies, their own toys, knowing what they have, what they came to school with, what they're supposed to be bringing home. Those are all things that are important for them to be more independent and would be greatly appreciated by their kindergarten teacher.
Thank you, Mrs. Meese. Before I jump into this next slide, I wanted to add a couple of things. Mrs. Meese referred to the kindergarten screenings. Once that registration window closes in mid-March, I think it was March 17th, you will get an email. Everyone who's registered will get an email, and each of the elementaries will have a sign-up genius where you can sign up to bring your child over to our Lindbergh Central Office, 9350 Sappington Road, and the kindergarten teachers from your school will be there, and they do a quick kindergarten screening. There's a little Q&A sheet for parents to fill out. It gives the kindergarten teachers a chance to get to see the kids, and they just go through a few things to see kind of where they are as they're getting ready for kindergarten. Some of that information helps us to compose our classes as we get ready to start the new school year. So when you register, that email will come out after that, and we would really appreciate you taking advantage and signing up for a screening appointment with your school. We usually have one day in May and then possibly another day in the summer at some point to get that screening done. And I wanted to add, I think Mrs. Meese said these, but some of the most important things is for your child to be able to ask and answer questions. And then also really love for them to be able to recognize their name if they see it in print. They don't need to write it or anything like that, but if they can recognize it, that would be great. I think someone clicked the raise their hand button in there. You can go to the Q&A and type your questions in there. We'll be handling the questions that way from the Q&A section. So then this slide here is toilet training. Just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that we do expect our kindergarten students to be able to use the restroom independently. That means that they are going to have to be able to use the bathroom appropriately, cleaning themselves, flushing the toilet, washing their hands, undoing and redoing their pants. If it's, even to sit on the toilet. I know some of them may have used kind of a special seat on the toilet, and we won't have those at school. We do not at school age change diapers in any capacity. So if your child is still in that phase where they're learning to use the restroom independently, we've got a few months, so you'll have a little work to do. Their parents step up and get them ready for that. We do ask that everyone's going to have you bring in a set of extra clothes because accidents do happen. And if that happens, we'll send those extra clothes down to the nurse and help the kiddo get changed so they can continue the school day. I had one question here before we move on to the next slide is, will students who attend full-time at ECE also complete the kindergarten screening at central office? Yes, they will, because this will be the school-age kindergarten teachers will actually be the ones screening them, and they will come to our district offices. So yes. All right, I think I covered all the toilet training. So we're going to go to purposeful play because kindergartners love to play, and we learn a lot about them by watching them play. And let's see, I believe Mrs. Eads.
Yeah. All right. So I know, especially to adults, play can seem frivolous or extra, but for children, it really is true that play is the work of children. It helps build problem-solving skills, reading skills, writing, math skills that they're probably learning explicitly at different parts of the day, but then they get to learn through experiences, and that experiential learning really helps them learn. So it says here, play with a purpose, but not to be pressure. Play games that require taking turns. Games where somebody wins and loses. That's a really good skill to learn before kindergarten, that you might not win every time. Role play, asking a friend to play. And what does that look like? And yeah, you might have to be really brave and ask somebody that you don't know how to play. And maybe you could practice that on the playground before you actually start at your school. You can talk about scenarios that involve maybe a friend only wants to play what they want to play, and you might have to compromise. A lot of skills that, we sort of take for granted, but that are really at the forefront for these 5-year-olds. Model and practice having a conversation, how to respond when somebody else asks you a question or is talking to you, using words to explain how they are feeling. And that can be really tricky, to be able to know if you're feeling mad, for example, and then to be able to identify that and come up with what you need. Those are really skills that we work on all year long. But even just starting to say, oh, it seems like you're feeling mad, or, kind of trying to give them words to use to go with their feelings. Imaginative play is great. Open-ended play like blocks, dolls, craft supplies, any kind of game where there's not like specific procedure, and encouraging them to have imagination while they're doing that. Like, oh, what are you building with these blocks? What could this structure be used for? What does your doll like? What do they need? Craft supplies. What could you create with this? Those are all great things for kindergartners to do. And we have playtime at school, and we'll do all these things too with open-ended play activities like blocks and supplies and art, things like that. Practicing good manners, that's also always good. And also different types of play, including playing outside, playing if you have like on playgrounds, but also, maybe in a, obviously in a place that's safe, but like maybe your backyard without a playground, and what can you explore and learn about the world around you, maybe on a hike with your family or something like that. But yeah, these are all things that you can do, and things that we'll be doing once they start kindergarten as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Eads. One thing I'll add in there, this is something I did with my children before they started kindergarten, is that on the weekends, you can't go up during the school day to the playgrounds, but, sometime between now and the start of school, you may want to go up on the weekend sometime. And we worked on like how to go down the slide and how to use some of the different equipment. I know it might sound a little silly, but that's important stuff. And we go down the slide, we don't go running up the slide, and just things like that. So every school will have, I think, usually 2 or 3 summer play dates where you can go and visit the school, and the playground will be open, but they're open on the weekends too, where you can go up as a family and check out the equipment and kind of talk to your children about how to use it and how to use it safely. So thank you again, Mrs. Eads. Yes, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned practicing like all these things, and maybe practicing how to go down the slide. Another good thing to practice is actually eating lunch with your child. So like, maybe even pack a lunch, sit down, eat it, and have your child open up whatever it is in their lunch that they need to eat, talk about what things would get thrown away and what things won't get thrown away. And after you've kind of practiced a couple of times with that, sometimes, especially at the beginning, it is a pretty quick lunch, and there's not a whole lot of time to talk. So a lot of socialization is encouraged to us to save it for playtime or recess, so that you have time to eat and then have energy for the afternoon. But practicing that beforehand, that's another thing that can help them have a better day those first couple weeks.
It's a great point, because our lunch is 20 minutes. So they'll have to come in and sit down. And if they brought their lunch, if you sent something they need to be able to open, they're going to want to be able to get into that quickly. And very good point Mrs. Eads said about know what gets thrown away and what doesn't. So if you're going to send some plastic container that you want to return home, make sure that your child knows, because they'll just dump everything. into the trash. But also practice with them on how to open those things. If they have a thermos or anything like that, if there's a whatever drink container they're using, so we have plenty of people in the cafeterias assisting, but they raise their hand and they have to wait for us to get over there. So the more they can do on their own, the happier they'll be, because they'll be able to eat quickly and get ready to go outside and play for recess. All right, we're going to start to get into the academic part of it now. So we're going to start with two of our panelists are going to talk. So we're going to start with Dr. Valter, and then we'll segue into Mrs. Hufker as we talk about early literacy.
All right, good evening. I'm excited to talk about a little bit about the things that you can do to get your child excited to become a reader and writer pretty quickly when they enter school. The first big thing is to make sure you're reading together on a daily basis. Children, when they enter kindergarten, we really want them to be able to sit and listen to a story for enjoyment or to learn something new. If you haven't yet, now is a great time to start talking about the parts of a book. So the front cover, the back cover, the direction that we read, the books are written by an author, how to treat books. So, treating books with care, handling them, how to get books from the library is a great practice. Always talk about what happened in the story, new ideas they got, or favorite parts. We often talk about reading aloud daily as if we're always reading storybooks. And a lot of our reading is storybooks because they love a good story. But it's also a great idea and a great practice if your child loves dinosaurs to read books about dinosaurs. If they love cats and dogs, check out that nonfiction section of the library also. Make reading a routine. So whether it's bedtime or, first thing when you get home in the afternoon, just have a special time set aside where reading is a routine so that when they start to read, you already have that built-in time every day. And even though it might drive us crazy, it's really a powerful practice to read books over and over. So if your child has a favorite book that you've read 500 times, it's okay to read it 500 more. That's actually a really strong part of developing literacy skills. Another part of early literacy is developing really strong language skills. So a lot of the things that I'm going to mention as early literacy skills, you've heard elsewhere as we've talked about play and self-help and socialization. So oral language, being able to talk and take turns in conversations is also a really big part of getting ready to read and ready to write. So encourage your child to tell stories. We know that sometimes those stories may go lots of directions and go on and on, but it's really critical that your child is starting to, tell things that happened, use a lot of language when they're talking, tell events that happened in order, or the beginning, middle, and end of something that happened to them. Making sure that when you're talking to kids, you are thinking about ways to build knowledge and vocabulary. So, using words that maybe your child hasn't heard before at the grocery store or at a trip to the zoo or at the park. Conversational turn taking. So Mrs. Eads mentioned this as part of play. And Mrs. Macy mentioned this as part of getting kids ready for the social skills that they will need in kindergarten. But it's also an early literacy skill to be able to take turns sharing ideas and building on ideas back and forth. And then also, as we get kids ready to start hearing sounds and being able to put words on paper, we want to start doing games and activities with oral language where kids are hearing sounds. It can be something as simple as, can you find a toy to put away that starts with the k sound? Can you find, something to wear today that starts with the d sound? So giving kids that kind of heads up about rhyming words or what words start with, because that is a skill that they're going to need, not only for reading, but it's really critical as they start writing and matching sounds with letters.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to talk about continuing early literacy and talking about working with your child's name. Like Craig mentioned earlier, it's really important that your child comes in knowing how to read their name, because all around the classroom, on their cubbies, on their desk, on their pencil box will be labeled with their name. So to set your kid up for success, it's really important that they're able to find their stuff. So really be practicing that. That's usually what kids learn how to read first. So that is something that you should be working on. One way that you can do that is by writing all of your family members' names down on a piece of paper and seeing if your child can find his or her name. Another way to work with your child's name is practicing identifying the letters in their first name. And then also you can work on writing their name legibly. It doesn't have to be just with paper and pencil. You can use fun things like chalk and paint and crayons, making it fun. And then another thing you can do is writing out your child's name and cutting it apart and having them try to put it back together, kind of like a puzzle, so they can practice the order of their letters. And then you can also discuss how many letters are in each person's name in your family. So these are all different ways to practice have your child's name and getting them used to finding their name in the classroom. Another thing that we will be working on in kindergarten is handwriting. If you're practicing letter making with your child, we really encourage you to teach them to start writing their letters at the top. So if you look at the picture of the A over on the side, a lot of kids like to start at the bottom. So they would start down by almost by where the 3 is and go up towards the 1. And we want to teach them to start at the top by the 1 and drag their pencil down and then go back up to the top. So we are going to be working on breaking this habit if your child starts at the bottom. But if you guys are working on letters at home, start practicing by putting their pencil at the top. Start writing and drawing at home. Drawing is a precursor to writing. So if your child is just practicing drawing right now, that is okay. Let them go wild with it. Alphabet practice is another important thing to be practicing at home, singing their ABCs and having them slow down and not sing their ABCs, but say their ABCs is really powerful. When you practice your letters, it's not just naming the letters. You can also work on the sounds and, like we talked about earlier, the letter formation. And then you can start practicing some simple nursery rhymes like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Bingo and Hey Diddle Diddle. This helps children start learning those rhyming words and starts playing with words and sounds. And then wordplay, Dr. Valter just mentioned earlier, having them look for things in their, or having them look for toys that start with a certain letter. You could play I Spy with sounds. These are all things that we are going to be doing in kindergarten, but it doesn't hurt to start them now. And then I forgot to mention the tripod grip. When you're practicing writing with your kiddos, we want to move them away from the whole fist. We want to have them start holding their pencil with just the 3 fingers, like in the tripod grip.
All right, thank you. Before we jump into early math, I just want to reiterate one of the things that Mrs. Hufker said was the drawing. As we start to get into kindergarten writing, not handwriting, but writing stories, we start out drawing pictures and telling a story that way. So please encourage your kids to draw those pictures and tell you the story that goes along with it while they're at home. So now Mrs. Meesey is going to talk to literacy is important, but so is numeracy. So Mrs. Meesey is going to talk to us about early math.
Sounds good. Thank you. We will be doing a lot of math in kindergarten as well. Like I said, literacy is really important, and that's a big focus, but it's also important when it comes to us to learn about counting and numbers and number sense. So something that you can start doing at home is practice counting out loud, counting objects around your house, counting things if you're out at the park, counting different things that you see, how many slides are on the playground, making it fun. Practice identifying your colors. That is something important. Especially like I know in my classroom, we have, my tables are colored. So I might say all the kids that sit at the green table do this, kids that sit at the orange table do this. So it's not just knowing your colors, but it's also being able to know your colors and then take those maybe to do something or be part of a group. Being able to sort objects by color and other categories. Finding shapes in their environment. We work in kindergarten on those 2D plane shapes. We also talk about 3D shapes. Being able to discuss more and less. I'm sure a lot of you have maybe done this with maybe dinner time, you know, eat more of your green beans and maybe less of your dessert. So making sure they kind of know those words and what those might mean in relation to everyday life, or also with numbers. You know, if you have 3 of this and 2 of this, which one is more, which one is less. Position words, that is one of the things we start kindergarten with, but it's nice of them to know when they come in, words like beside, under, below, above, next to. Those can all also help when it comes to following directions. If I'm telling a student to grab your glove, it's under your chair, because right now we're all kind of losing our gloves and mittens and hats. So being able to kind of help them out with those things and then make sure they know those vocabulary words. Counting in daily routines, such as counting cups needed for the table, helping set the table, being able to count how many you might need for this, how many our family might need for that. Identifying numbers, 0 through 10 is we start with doing a big thing, big curriculums on 0 through 5 to begin with, and that number sense that goes into it, but we do jump into 10 and really making sure we're solid with that number sense foundation. And then finding patterns in anything, finding patterns in nature, finding patterns in weather, doing the typical A-B patterns where you do with colors or shapes. Those are all things that you can start working on for kindergarten, and then we will continue working on when they get there.
Thank you, Mrs. Meese. And she said something that reminded me, this has nothing to do with math, but she talked about losing mittens and gloves and things like that. So when we get to that point of the next school year where we're starting to bring jackets and things like that, make sure you have your child's name labeled in their possessions, because our lost and founds get a little out of control with unlabeled jackets and things like that. So label the stuff when they start to bring that. All right, we're going to talk about, this is going to be Mrs. Eads going to talk about what will kindergarten be like. I think Mrs. Eads.
Yeah.
Maybe Mrs. Hufker. Okay.
The first few days, yeah. I can talk about this. So at the beginning of kindergarten, the focus is really making sure that every student feels welcome, feels loved, is excited to come to school tomorrow. And we do a lot of community and team building, like activities and games, and a lot of learning about each other. And we do some academic things, but the focus is really on helping students build bonds and enjoy the school that they're at. We'll work on sometimes academic, social, and fine motor skills, which is always good to freshen up on those. And making sure that we know how to use scissors and how to use glue and put caps on markers, all things like that are good to make sure supplies last a lot of the school year. Cooperative learning activities to, like I said, just to make sure that every kid knows that they're going to love school. Some other information, Flyers Club is before and after school, and they have their own sort of list, or I guess you contact them sort of separate from registration.
I'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
If you want to finish up those last 2 points there.
Yeah. Drop off and pick up and bus information. You'll get that early or pretty close to the beginning of school, like that week before. And as far as bus information, if your child's going to be picked up each day or dropped off, then you'll get information from your school about exactly what that'll look like too. But we really encourage, I know at Dressel, probably at all schools, we really encourage whatever the form of transportation is going to be for the school year, that you do that first day. I know you probably want to take pictures with your children or with your child and everything like that. And we encourage just to maybe take those pictures at home, and you can always come to the school and like take a picture, but then do whatever that typical drop off looks like. So maybe your child's going to take the bus and they take the bus, but then you meet them at the school or something like that. just because that first day really sets the tone for the next couple weeks and the beginning of that school year. But again, all that bus information, drop off, pickup, you'll get that information from your specific school before the school year starts. For parent communication, your student's teacher will communicate with you, usually with email for the most part, and they'll let you know anything that your child needs to bring. There will be student supply lists up on the website, Lindbergh's website, and you'll be able to get all that information, but you'll also get communication from the teacher in like the week or so before school starts.
All right, I'm going to add a couple of things to what Mrs. Ead said there with those last few bullets. So one of the things is we got a cool new system we're going to have next year where you will get, as a parent, you're going to get to choose, do I want my information as an email, as a text? Do I want it when it gets sent out, or do I want it all at the end of the day? Now, if you get a text where Mrs. Ead sent an email, it's just going to give you a link to that email in the text. But so you'll have some voice in how you want that. And when you register and then when school starts, we're going to inundate you with all kinds of information. So one of those was Flyers Club, which is our before and after care. Each school has a before and after care added. They start as early as 6 a.m. and they go as late as 6 p.m. That is a fee-based program, and they have different price ranges for if you just come in the morning, if you just go in the afternoon, do you go all 5 days? And that is run through our community ed program. And when you register, we'll have some information about that. If you plan to use that before and after care, the Flyers Club, I would advise you to get that set up right after you register when it's available, because they do have a finite amount of spaces. So we don't want you to miss out on that. We try to accommodate everyone we can, but sometimes they have filled up. So just want you to be aware of that. With the pickup and drop off, as Mrs. Ead said, try to get in that routine. We love for the kids to stay in a routine. It's easier for everyone. So I know sometimes you have to do some different things, but as often as possible, you know, if they're going to ride the bus, let's try and have them ride the bus every day. If it's going to be parent pickup, let's try and do parent pickup every day. It could get a little confusing, especially for our 5 and 6 year olds, when it's like, well, on Mondays I'm doing this, Tuesdays I'm doing this, every other Friday I'm doing this. And we know that has to happen sometimes, but the more we can stick to a routine, the better. Also, when it comes time, we want the child to be able to recognize their bus number. They'll have a bus tag, where adults can help them make sure they're getting on the right bus and into the right classroom. We help them get there. But, you know, we want them to start recognizing their bus, also recognizing their bus stop. Where am I supposed to get off of the bus? Those first few days, you know, it's our job. We want to get these kiddos home safely. So, but if they can kind of recognize, and the buses, kindergartners all sit up in the front of the buses, and someone, a parent, grandparent, someone has to be at the bus stop for our kindergartners. The bus drivers are not going to let a kindergarten off by themselves at the bus stop. So just so you know, that an adult will have to be there for our kindergartners to get off of the bus. And one last thing I was going to say with Mrs. Eads kind of referred to it about being positive, because we're going to have so much fun. Behavior influences behavior. And I know you might get anxious as parents, but even if you're anxious about it, you know, let's act like we're super excited about school and everyone loves school, because that's the tone that we want to set for our kiddos. We have Stephanie Reagan has raised her hand. So Stephanie, if you can, I don't know what this looks like on your phones necessarily, but if you can find the Q&A portion and type your question in, that's what I'd like to ask you to do at this time. If not, I'm going to give you my email at the end, and you can email me and I will make sure I get your question answered. So now I think we're going to go to Mrs. Hufker.
Yes. Thank you. We are going to go and look at what a kindergarten schedule may look like at your school. So can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is an example day. Every school looks different, but I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of the basics. When your child comes in and they're unpacking their backpack and putting their stuff away, typically classrooms have out play bins where the kids can come and just kind of have a soft start to their morning. They can play with toys at their table and just chat with their friends. And then we have a morning meeting, which is a time where we do calendar. We talk about the weather, we graph the days of school and things like that. And then you might have, the teacher might ask a question to each person in the class and they go around and answer it. This is where we like share about what we did over the weekend. Then we'll have a reading mini lesson followed by reading groups and reading stations. So what that looks like is teachers are meeting with small groups of students while other students are independently doing different reading stations around the classroom. Then they go out to recess, and then we have word work, which is typically whole group, and that will be going over the alphabet chart, singing songs, doing different word games, maybe doing like things on mini whiteboards, and then we'll have writing. And then followed by lunch and recess, and then rest time. Rest time is only about 15 to 20 minutes. So it's not a very long time. A lot of kids either are still taking naps and that's not long enough for them. So if your child is one of those kids, start cutting out that nap time. If they don't rest and they're kind of anxious about what that will look like, we also offer kids to either color or look at books quietly or just relax during that time. And then we go to specials, which are art, music, PE, and design lab. You might not have heard about design lab. Design lab is a STEM class where they can work on building, engineering, and coding. And even the kindergartners get to code and do all those cool things. And then we have math and science, which again is whole group and small group and independent workstations usually. And we'll have snack and playtime and then dismissal.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Hufker. Before we jump into this, I had another question. You got another slide. I'm sorry. I thought we were going to our favorite books, but we did have another question. Since I've already interrupted Mrs. Hufker, I'm going to go ahead and continue with it. Question was asked, if I have an older sibling that's a high schooler, could that be the person that meets our kindergarten student at the bus stop? We won't let another elementary student. So if you had a fifth grader sibling, the bus company will not allow that, but they will allow a high schooler. But my advice would be to make sure you as a parent go down with that high schooler maybe in the first couple of days and introduce them to the bus driver so that they know that is okay. And when I'm saying the bus company, we actually contract out our transportation services to a company called First Student. So I would just make sure you make that introduction, and then a high schooler would be fine as the year goes on. Sorry, Mrs. Hufker.
No, you're fine. So how can you get your child ready? We gave you a lot of information today. Probably the most important thing is what Craig's mentioned earlier. Start discussing kindergarten in a positive way. Get them excited. This is a big deal. It was mentioned earlier, a lot of schools have summer play dates. So when you register for kindergarten, you'll get added to like the school's Facebook page or their mailing list to find out about those dates. Really try to get your kid up to the school, get them to that playground so they're starting to get comfortable so they can learn some of their classmates, see some of the teachers, see some of the staff. So those are really great opportunities. Practice reading to your child. Get that love of reading started early. A great way to work on letters is to watch the Leapfrog Letter Factory. It's a great video to do letters, do sounds. That is also just found on YouTube. Start or keep a schedule or a daily routine for your children. Kindergarten is very routine. So we will have a visual schedule in our classroom, and we will be going through the schedule pretty much every single day the same. So this could be something that you can incorporate into your own life just to get your kid ready for that. Practice those self-help skills that we talked about, buttoning, tying, zipping. Use your environment as a learning tool for letters and numbers. Hopefully tonight we gave you some good ideas on how to do that. Practice cutting, practice using Play-Doh. Those are great to work on those fine motor skills that are really important for kindergarten. Slowly transition nap time out. Like I said earlier, nap time or rest time is only 15, 20 minutes max. So if your kid still naps, that might be something you want to start transitioning out of. And then giving your child responsibilities at home. At school, they're going to be responsible for keeping track of their backpack, keeping track of their school supplies, and their lunchbox. So starting to give them those jobs at home will be really, really important.
All right. I have one more question before our panelists start to share some of their favorite books to read before school starts. Can children have bus stops at two different houses if we have a case of mom and dad living in different places? When you register, you're going to put all that information in, and I think it would be approved as long as it's a routine to where it's this week we always go to this house, and this week we always go to this address, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday go to this address, Tuesday, Thursday go to this address. So the more routine, the better the chance of making sure that gets approved. But you will turn all that in a transportation form, and you can also send any questions about transportation. We have an email address that will be in the registration information, and I think it's transportation@lindberghschools.ws. But you'll start filling all that information out during the registration process. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists, and who wants to go first and talk about their books?
I'll go first. So we talked a little bit earlier about finding some good books to read and making reading part of the routine. As we go into summer, not quite yet, there's still a lot of ice on the ground, but as you go into summer, get closer to school, it's a great idea to start reading some books to get your child thinking about kindergarten and what that routine is going to look like. So a lot of us on the panel picked some of our favorites to share with you, so you have a little list started of books. One of my favorites, I love Anything and Everything by Mo Willems, the Pigeon series, the Elephant and Piggy series. And one of my favorites, as a matter of fact, I had this book delivered to my niece who's in kindergarten on her first day of school, is The Pigeon Has to Go to School, because the pigeon is experiencing some really big feelings about going to school for the very first time. And in typical Mo Willems fashion, learn to deal with those feelings and name them and understand that it's okay to have big feelings and that school is actually going to be a pretty great place to end up.
I suggested the book Jabari Jumps, and it's about a kid, Jabari, who's scared to jump into the pool from the high diving board. And so it's good because it's summer and got the pool theme going on, but it's also great to think about times when you have to be brave. And kindergarten can be pretty scary, and there's a lot of new experiences going on with the start of kindergarten. So it can be good to have role models for how to be brave.
I suggested Clifford Goes to Kindergarten. Everybody loves Clifford the Big Red Dog. So this is a great book that goes through kind of what Clifford's kindergarten day will look like. And it's actually very similar to what your kiddo might experience on the first day, minus the big red dog.
I had suggested Chrysanthemum. It's a really sweet little story about a little girl and her first experience at school in dealing with other kids who don't all think she's absolutely perfect. I know I use this book a lot when we start talking at the beginning of the year about our own names, about our classmates' names, and getting to know each other. And it's just a sweet story that goes through her experience and how she deals with it, and then how her mom and dad kind of help her through it. And it's just a favorite among myself and I know a lot of our students.
I think in past years, I have put out a different book and then it hasn't been removed. So I just have a lot of books that you should read the summer before starting kindergarten. So I'm not trying to take anyone's, but jump in if I am. But Don't Eat Your Classmates is great. And it's so funny about a dinosaur starting kindergarten who eats her classmates. So it's very funny and ridiculous and can take a little bit of the pressure off of any anxiety you might have, your child might have about the start of kindergarten. And our welcome is also great to think about, like, wow, you're going to meet so many different people at kindergarten, and it's going to be a place where you are loved and welcome, and you're going to meet lots of new friends. And it kind of goes through what a kindergarten or, any school day can look like. So it's kind of good to give a little, set a little expectations too for what school's like.
All right. Thank you all. We're going to wrap things up in the next few slides. My email address is in the comments. So if you have any questions at all, and if the Q&A was not working for you, please feel free to email me and I will get you the answers that you need. I neglected to mention when I was talking about the buses a while ago, we do have a couple apps that will be very important, and you'll get all this information at registration, but we use Pick My Kid, and that helps us manage our car line for drop off and dismissal. Those of you who are doing parent pickup, and the app lets you check in when you're on campus so we know what order the cars are in, and that's how we will start to release the children from the building. And then we also, if your child rides the bus, there's an app called First View, and it will actually let you kind of track the bus in close to real time. I think it might be a little delayed, but you can kind of see where the bus is and how close it's getting to your house, and when the kiddos will get dropped off. So this is the school calendar for next year. I don't think this is up on the website yet, but it will be up there soon. So kind of a sneak peek. This is a hot take here with next year's calendar. And then if you go to the next slide, Beth, I put some important dates out here. Once again, February 3rd is when registration begins. We will have those screening dates available for you after registration. Each school is going to have 2 or 3 play dates over the summer, and they will have some type of orientation for you before school starts. August 1st is when our class placements will go live, which means you will be able to log into our student information system. It's called Infinite Campus, and you will be able to log in and it will tell you who your child's teacher is. And then shortly after that, you'll start to get some emails from the teacher. I call it a soft placement because with kindergarten, we always reserve the right to, we try to build the classes as best we can, but every once in a while, we might have to do a little movement within the first few weeks before Labor Day. Doesn't happen very often, but we always kind of reserve that right. Miss Johnson said that the calendar is on the website. So August 14th is our Meet the Teacher night. That's a Thursday evening. So the buildings do it slightly different. So your building principal will communicate the schedule of that for you. August 19th is our first day of school. And then November 4th or 6th will be our family teacher conferences. And December 19th, I'm jumping all the way to winter break. That's our only half day of school, I believe, next year. That's a noon dismissal, and that will be the start of winter break. So I covered the first half of the year for you with important dates. So I think my next slides are redundant here. Once again, there's the link to register, and that'll be on the website February 3rd. Be looking for that. Here's the QR code. If you play this video on our YouTube channel later, and you can just click the QR code and it'll take you right there on your phone. And I put, once again, the slide with the next slide, Beth, is once again, there's the number to call for our registrar, Terry Musante, and the email address that you can reach her at. And this information will all be on the website once kindergarten registration opens up. So I apologize our Q&A didn't work as well as we would have liked it to work. I want to thank all the ladies and Miss Johnson for helping us out with our series tonight. And if you, let's see, I think someone just posted a question. Let me see real quick. If my child has an IEP and we'll have a transition meeting, will the kindergarten screening be part of that, or do we still schedule a separate screening? We have you do a separate screening because Mrs. Eilers might be at the IEP, but then Mrs. Hufker might be there at the screening and meet your child. And the teacher that screens your child that day, that's not necessarily going to be your classroom teacher, but it gets us a chance to meet and get some information from the parents and see how the kiddos are prepared for school. So yes, you would have to, unfortunately, we may have to see you twice if your child's coming in with an IEP. But we're all welcoming here, so we want to see as much as possible. The YouTube video, I think it will be posted by tomorrow. at some time. So that'll be good. So hey, we're getting some questions in here at the end under the wire. But once again, thank you for attending this evening. And yes, the YouTube video will be posted tomorrow, I just said. And welcome to Lindbergh. We're excited to have you. Excited to see your kiddos. Any emails? My email address is in the comments. You can find me on the website, chamby@lindberghschools.ws. Any questions you have, feel free to send them. Everyone, have a wonderful evening.